The morning of June 19th, 1944, Philippine Sea. Admiral Ozawa stands on the bridge of his flagship Tai-Ho, watching the first wave of his strike force disappear into the western sky. 69 aircraft, Zeros, Vals, and Kates, flown by some of Japan's best remaining pilots. The air smells of aviation fuel and salt spray. Ozawa's weathered hands grip the rail as he calculates the mathematics of the coming engagement. His intelligence staff has confirmed it. The Americans have brought their new carriers, the Essex-class ships that have been appearing in reconnaissance photographs for months. Big ships, modern ships. But Ozawa has 9 carriers under his command: Tai-Ho, Shokaku, Zuikaku, and 6 lighter vessels, a formidable force by any measure. He's planned this battle meticulously, using land-based aircraft from the Marianas to soften American defenses before his carrier planes deliver the decisive blow. What Ozawa doesn't know, what he cannot possibly know, is that he's not facing a fleet. He's facing an industrial miracle that has already made this battle obsolete, because steaming toward him through the Philippine Sea are not 9 American carriers, not 12. 28 fleet carriers are now operational in the United States Navy, and 15 of them are here, right now, forming the largest concentration of naval air power in human history. This is the story of the moment Japan's admirals realized they weren't fighting a war. They were fighting a factory, and that factory would not stop, could not be destroyed, and had already won before the first shot was fired. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The disbelief didn't begin at the Philippine Sea. It began 18 months earlier, in the quiet offices of Japanese naval intelligence in Tokyo. Lieutenant Commander Nakajima Chikataka sits at his desk in the Navy Ministry building, reviewing the latest reports from agents stationed in neutral ports. His eyes move across the page once, then again, certain he's misread the numbers. According to sources in Lisbon and Buenos Aires, the Americans have launched 7 new fleet carriers in 1943 alone. 7. In a single year. Nakajima checks the names against previous intelligence reports. USS Essex, commissioned in December 1942. USS Yorktown, the second ship to bear that name, in April 1943, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Intrepid, Hornet. The last 2 names sting particularly hard. Japan had sunk both carriers in 1942, celebrated victories that were supposed to have dealt crippling blows to American naval aviation. Now those names are back, not as repairs or conversions, but as entirely new ships. Nakajima drafts a memo to his superiors, carefully wording his concerns. The production rate, if accurate, represents a scale of shipbuilding that Japan simply cannot match. Each carrier requires approximately 2.5 million man-hours to construct. American shipyards, he notes, appear to have transformed carrier production into something resembling an assembly line. The response from his superiors arrives 3 days later, a terse note suggesting that Nakajima has been deceived by American propaganda. Carriers, they remind him, are complex vessels, requiring specialized labor and lengthy fitting-out periods. The Americans are likely commissioning converted merchant hulls or exaggerating their construction numbers to intimidate Japanese leadership. Nakajima files the memo away, but the numbers haunt him, because he's seen American industrial capacity before the war. He knows what those factories can do when fully mobilized. In Washington, Admiral Ernest King reviews production schedules with a satisfaction he rarely displays. The Essex-class program, conceived in 1940, has exceeded even Navy's optimistic projections. Newport News Shipbuilding has cut construction time from 24 months to 16. The Philadelphia Naval Shipyard is working around the clock, prefabricating hull sections in covered workshops before assembling them in dry dock. Every component, from gun mounts to radar systems, has been standardized across all vessels. When USS Intrepid suffers damage during fitting out, Replacement parts arrive from 3 different suppliers within 48 hours. This is not traditional shipbuilding. This is manufacturing at a scale that transforms naval warfare itself. The ships emerging from American yards displace 31,000 tons, fully loaded, carry 90 aircraft, and can sustain operations for months without returning to port. Their armoured flight decks can withstand damage that would sink earlier carriers. Their radar systems can detect incoming aircraft at ranges exceeding 100 miles. But the real revolution is in the numbers. By the end of 1943, the United States will have completed 10 Essex-class carriers. By mid-1944, that number will reach 17. And the production lines are not slowing, they're accelerating. Each new carrier enters service with a fully trained crew, equipped aircraft, and enough ammunition and aviation fuel for extended combat operations. The logistics tail supporting these ships extends back to factories in Pennsylvania, aircraft plants in California, and training facilities scattered across the American South. Japan, in the same period, completes 3 fleet carriers. Taiho, with her armoured flight deck, represents the pinnacle of Japanese naval engineering. She takes 3 years to build and incorporates design features meant to match American ship durability. Unryu and Amagi follow similar patterns, each requiring more than 2 years from keel laying to commissioning. The quality is extraordinary. Japanese craftsmanship remains among the world's finest, but quantity has become its own quality, and Japan simply cannot match American production tempo. Admiral Ozawa knows these numbers. His staff has compiled detailed assessments of American naval strength, but numbers on paper cannot convey the psychological impact of facing this disparity in battle. Theory and reality are about to collide in the Philippine Sea, and the collision will shatter every assumption the Imperial Japanese Navy has held about modern warfare. In the ready rooms of USS Lexington, USS Enterprise, and 13 other American carriers, pilots receive their final briefings for June 19th. The tactical situation is clear. Japanese carrier forces are approaching from the west. Land-based aircraft from Guam and Tinian will likely attack first, followed by strikes from Ozawa's carriers. The American response is methodical and overwhelming. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer of VF-15, flying from Essex, reviews his squadron's patrol sector. His pilots, each with more than 2 years of intensive training, will fly Grumman F-6F Hellcats. The Hellcat carries 6 50 caliber machine guns and has a top speed of 375 miles per hour. More importantly, it's durable, reliable, and easy to fly, allowing pilots to focus on tactics rather than aircraft handling. The Japanese, by contrast, are sending pilots with as little as 6 months of training flying the Mitsubishi A6M0. Once the most feared fighter in the Pacific, the Zero remains highly maneuverable but is lightly armoured and vulnerable to the Hellcat's concentrated firepower. Japanese pilot training has deteriorated dramatically since 1942. The experienced aviators who attacked Pearl Harbor are dead, killed in grinding battles at Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, and dozens of smaller engagements that bled away irreplaceable expertise. At 8:30 a.m., radar operators aboard USS Lexington detect the first Japanese formation, 69 aircraft at 75 miles range, approaching from the west. The call goes out across Task Force 58. "Hey, Rube!" The old circus cry for help brings every available fighter scrambling to altitude. Within minutes, more than 200 Hellcats are airborne, forming a defensive screen 50 miles from the American carriers. Admiral Ozawa's strike force flies into this screen at 10:15 a.m., expecting scattered opposition. What they encounter is systematic destruction. Commander Brewer's squadron intercepts the first group of Japanese dive bombers at 25,000 feet. The engagement lasts less than 10 minutes. Brewer personally shoots down 4 aircraft, his wingmen account for 3 more, and the entire Japanese formation fragments under the concentrated attack. This scene repeats across 75 miles of sky. American pilots, guided by fighter directors using radar plots, intercept Japanese formations before they can organize coordinated attacks. The few enemy aircraft that penetrate the fighter screen face a wall of anti-aircraft fire from American battleships and cruisers. 5-inch guns with proximity-fused shells create aerial bursts that no aircraft can survive. By 11:30 a.m., Ozawa's first raid is annihilated. Of 69 aircraft launched, only 27 return to their carriers. The Americans lose 4 fighters, 3 to operational accidents rather than combat. But Ozawa doesn't know the extent of his losses. Radio discipline has broken down. Pilots report attacking American carriers, claiming hits and near misses. The Admiral orders his second wave to launch. 128 aircraft this time. He's committing everything to this battle. The second raid fares worse than the first. 8 aircraft turn back with mechanical problems. As the formation passes over Japanese surface ships, nervous gunners mistake them for American attackers and shoot down 2 of their own planes, damaging 8 others so severely they cannot continue. The remaining aircraft fly directly into the American fighter screen, now reinforced and fully alerted. Lieutenant Commander Alex Vratsiu of VF-16, flying from Lexington, has the most successful engagement of the day. He shoots down 6 Japanese dive bombers in 8 minutes, his gun camera recording each kill. "I simply pulled in behind each one and gave him a burst," Vratsiu later reports. "They went down so fast I had trouble keeping count." It's not boastfulness. It's the simple reality of superior training, superior aircraft, and superior tactics meeting an outmatched opponent. By 2 p.m., Admiral Ozawa has launched 4 separate strikes. 373 aircraft have taken off from his carriers. Fewer than 130 return. The cream of Japanese naval aviation, pilots who survived months of grinding combat, are gone, disappeared into the Pacific in less than 6 hours. American pilots are already calling it the Great Marianas Turkey. Shoot, a phrase that will define the battle for history. But the day isn't over. At 3:40 p.m., a massive explosion tears through Taiho's hull. Aviation fuel vapors, accumulating in damaged ventilation systems, ignite from a single spark. The blast travels through the carrier's internal spaces at supersonic speed, rupturing bulkheads and tearing apart structural members. Within minutes, Admiral Ozawa's flagship is sinking. 1,500 men go down with her, including the staff officers who planned this catastrophic battle. An hour later, USS Kavala, an American submarine, fires 6 torpedoes at carrier Shokaku. 4 hit, ripping open the veteran carrier's hull. Shokaku, survivor of Pearl Harbor and hero of the Coral Sea, slides beneath the waves carrying more than 1,200 men to their deaths. In less than 6 hours, Ozawa has lost 3 carriers, more than 350 aircraft, and nearly 3,000 men. The Americans haven't suffered a single major ship hit. Ozawa, rescued by a destroyer and transferred to carrier Zuikaku, stares at the horizon where Taiho and Shokaku disappeared. The mathematics are inescapable now. He brought 9 carriers into this battle. The Americans brought 15, but that's not the number that haunts him. It's the question his intelligence officer asks in a quiet voice. "Admiral, if they can put 15 carriers here, in this one battle, how many more do they have?" The answer arrives through intelligence channels over the following weeks. The Americans have 28 fleet carriers, operational or completing final trials. 28? The number is so large that Japanese naval planners initially refuse to believe it. They demand confirmation from multiple sources. Every source confirms the same impossible truth. The United States is producing carriers faster than Japan can train pilots to fly from them. At the Navy Ministry in Tokyo, the mood shifts from confidence to something approaching despair. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, recently escaped from a plane crash in the Philippines, reviews the intelligence reports with Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet. The reports detail not just the Essex-class carriers, but the dozens of light carriers and escort carriers America is producing simultaneously. Independence-class light carriers, converted from cruiser hulls, Casablanca-class escort carriers, built in such numbers that they're being produced faster than they can be named. We calculated that America's industrial capacity was perhaps 5 times our own, Fukudome says quietly. We were wrong. It's more than 10 times, perhaps 15. Toyoda doesn't respond immediately. He's looking at photographs of American shipyards, taken by reconnaissance aircraft on rare overflights. The images show carriers in various stages of construction, their hulls stretching hundreds of feet, their flight decks taking shape with almost mechanical precision. Photographs don't show is the system behind the production. In American factories, components are manufactured in climate-controlled facilities before being transported to shipyards for final assembly. Hull sections are prefabricated, complete with internal piping and electrical systems. When a section arrives at dry dock, workers bolt and weld it into place in days rather than weeks. Gun mounts, radar arrays, and catapult systems are installed by teams who perform the same tasks on ship after ship, developing expertise that dramatically reduces construction time. The Japanese, building carriers as individual projects, cannot match this efficiency. Each ship requires unique solutions to engineering problems. Skilled workers move from project to project, but institutional knowledge doesn't accumulate. When a carrier is completed, the team disperses. The next carrier starts from scratch. American shipyards, by contrast, are learning factories. Each carrier is built faster than the last, because the workers are performing identical tasks with ever-increasing proficiency. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The disparity becomes personal in October 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Admiral Takeo Kurita commands the Center Force, a powerful surface action group built around battleships Yamato and Musashi. His mission is to break through American defenses and destroy the invasion fleet in Leyte Gulf. On paper, his force is formidable. 2 super battleships, each mounting 18-inch guns capable of sinking any ship afloat. Heavy cruisers and destroyers screening the formation. But on October 24th, as Kurita's force transits the Philippine Sea, American carrier aircraft appear overhead, wave after wave of them, striking with coordinated precision that speaks to extensive training and unlimited resources. Musashi, the most heavily armored battleship ever built, absorbs 19 torpedo hits and 17 bomb strikes before capsizing. More than 1,000 men die with her. The attacks continue throughout the day. Kurita loses 3 heavy cruisers before he even reaches the invasion beaches. The aircraft attacking Kurita's force come from multiple carriers: Essex, Enterprise, Franklin, Intrepid, and others. Each carrier launches multiple strikes, recovering and rearming aircraft with mechanical efficiency before launching again. The pilots are fresh, the aircraft are maintained to exacting standards, and the ammunition supplies are effectively unlimited. Kurita's force has no air cover. Japanese land-based aircraft from the Philippines are engaged elsewhere. Admiral Ozawa's carriers, sailing as a decoy force far to the north, carry barely 100 aircraft among 4 ships. When Kurita breaks through to Samar on the morning of October 25th, he encounters exactly what he fears most. American escort carriers, 6 of them, operating off the Philippine coast. These are not the Essex-class giants that destroyed Musashi. They're smaller, slower ships, converted from merchant hulls, but they're American carriers, and they have aircraft. Kurita's lookouts report them with a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. More carriers. Always more carriers. The battle off Samar becomes legendary for the courage of American destroyer crews who charge Japanese battleships to protect the carriers. But what breaks Kurita's will isn't the destroyers. It's the endless waves of aircraft rising from those escort carrier decks. Even these small carriers, each carrying fewer than 30 aircraft, launch multiple strikes. And Kurita knows, with absolute certainty, that even if he sinks every ship in front of him, more carriers will arrive tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, At 9:30 a.m., with his force scattered and under continuous air attack, Kurita orders a retreat. His heavy cruisers have expended most of their anti-aircraft ammunition. His destroyers are running low on fuel, and the aircraft keep coming. He has no way to know that he's actually facing only 3 functional carriers at this point. The others have been damaged or have exhausted their ordnance. But it doesn't matter. The perception of endless American strength is as effective as the reality. I saw carriers everywhere, Kurita later tells interrogators. Every time we turned, more aircraft appeared. I began to believe they had an unlimited number of ships. He's not entirely wrong. At the moment Kurita retreats, the United States Navy operates 99 carriers of all types. 99. Japan, at its wartime peak, operated 25, and American production is still accelerating. The psychological impact on Japanese naval officers is profound and permanent. These are men trained in the tradition of decisive battle, the climactic engagement where superior skill and fighting spirit overcome material disadvantages. They've studied Tsushima, where Admiral Togo destroyed the Russian fleet in 1905 through tactical brilliance. They believe, deeply and sincerely, that courage and expertise can triumph over mere numbers. The Essex-class carriers prove them wrong in the most devastating way possible. These ships don't win through tactical genius or superior fighting spirit. They win through relentless presence. For every Japanese success, 3 American carriers arrive to reverse it. For every American ship sunk, 2 more appear on the horizon. The mathematics of industrial warfare admit no counter-strategy. Production capacity becomes the decisive weapon, and Japan has no answer to it. Lieutenant Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived the war, later writes about this realization. We trained our pilots for 1 year, then 2 years, perfecting their skills. The Americans trained their pilots for 2 years, then built so many carriers that even mediocre pilots had platforms to fight from. We chose quality. They chose quantity. And their quantity was so overwhelming that quality became irrelevant. It's a harsh assessment, but the statistics support it. By December 1944, the United States has commissioned 24 Essex-class carriers. Production of light carriers and escort carriers brings the total to more than 100 hulls. Japan, in the same period, has completed 4 fleet carriers since Pearl Harbor, and all 4 are sunk by early 1945. The disparity isn't just numerical, it's categorical. Japan is fighting a 20th century war with 19th century production methods. In the final months of the war, Japanese naval operations effectively cease. The surviving carriers, Amagi, Katsuragi, Kasagi, and the converted liner Shinano, have no fuel, no aircraft, and no trained pilots. They sit at anchor in Japanese ports, painted to resemble civilian vessels, hoping to avoid American bombs. It's a fate worse than destruction. These ships, representing years of effort and immense resources, serve no purpose. They're museum pieces before the war even ends. Shinano, converted from a Yamato-class battleship hull into the largest carrier ever built, survives exactly 10 days after commissioning. On November 29, 1944, USS Archerfish fires 6 torpedoes at the massive ship during her maiden voyage. 4 hit. The carrier, poorly designed and hurriedly completed, sinks with more than 1,000 men aboard. Her aircraft complement, carefully hoarded and trained, never lands on her deck. She represents the ultimate futility of Japan's position. Even when they build something extraordinary, they lack the resources to use it effectively. The Essex carriers, meanwhile, operate with impunity. By March 1945, they're launching strikes against the Japanese home islands, attacking targets that were supposed to be invulnerable. Their aircraft mine the inland sea, destroying what remains of Japan's merchant fleet. They strike airfields, factories, and rail yards with precision that speaks to total air superiority. Japanese interceptors, when they manage to take off, face overwhelming numbers of Hellcats and Corsairs, flown by pilots with hundreds of hours of combat experience. The irony is not lost on surviving Japanese naval officers. They built a navy to fight for decisive victory in a single climactic battle. They got a war of attrition where the enemy could lose 1,000 times and still have resources to continue. American industrial capacity, mobilized for total war, proved to be a weapon more powerful than any battleship gun or carrier strike force. Admiral Ozawa, who survived the war and later served in Japan's self-defense forces, reflects on the Philippine Sea battle decades later. "I knew we were outnumbered. I knew the Americans had more carriers, but I believed superior tactics and fighting spirit could compensate for the disparity. I was wrong. When you face an enemy who can build a new carrier every month, tactics become irrelevant. You're not fighting a navy, you're fighting an economy, and economies don't retreat." The final toll is stark. The United States completes 24 Essex-class fleet carriers during World War II, with additional ships completed in the immediate post-war period. These carriers participate in every major Pacific campaign from Tarawa to Okinawa. They launch more than 300,000 combat sorties, destroy thousands of Japanese aircraft, and sink hundreds of ships. Their presence at sea is so overwhelming that by mid-1945, Japanese naval commanders refuse to sortie because they know survival is impossible. Japan completes 6 fleet carriers during the war years. All 6 are sunk before the surrender. The conversion of submarines to aircraft carriers, the desperate attempts to build carriers from merchant hulls, phantom projects that never leave the drawing board, all testify to Japan's inability to match American production. The numbers are not close. They're not even comparable. America didn't win the carrier war. America overwhelmed it. The legacy extends beyond World War II. The Essex-class carriers serve in Korea, Vietnam, and as training ships into the 1980s. USS Lexington, the last of the class to retire, serves 49 years before becoming a museum ship in Corpus Christi. 4 Essex carriers remain today as floating museums, testimony to the industrial miracle that won the Pacific War. Visitors walk their decks, tour their hangar bays, and examine the aircraft that once launched against Japanese targets. The ships are smaller than modern supercarriers, but their impact on history is immeasurable. For the Japanese admirals who faced these ships in combat, the experience is haunting. They entered the war believing that spirit and skill could overcome material disadvantages. They learned, in the most painful way imaginable, that modern warfare is fundamentally an industrial enterprise. The nation that can build more, faster, and better will prevail regardless of tactical brilliance or fighting spirit. It's a lesson that reshapes post-war Japanese military thinking entirely. The question that Admiral Ozawa asked himself at the Philippine Sea, "How many more do they have?" becomes the defining question of industrial age warfare. How do you fight an enemy whose production capacity exceeds your ability to inflict damage? How do you plan strategy when every calculation includes the assumption that your opponent can replace losses faster than you can cause them? These questions haunt military planners to this day. The Essex-class carriers didn't just win battles. They demonstrated that war between industrialized nations is decided in factories before the first shot is fired. Japan's admirals, trained in the tradition of naval warfare as an art form, discovered that art cannot defeat engineering at scale. It's a realization that changes warfare forever, transforming military planning from a focus on decisive battles to calculations of industrial capacity and resource mobilization. The story ends not with surrender documents or dramatic battles, but with simple mathematics. 28 American fleet carriers versus 9 Japanese carriers at the Philippine Sea. 99 American carriers of all types versus 25 Japanese carriers at peak strength. 10,000 American aircraft produced monthly versus 800 Japanese aircraft in the same period. The numbers tell the story more eloquently than any battle narrative. For the men who served aboard Essex-class carriers, the experience is different. They remember the exhausting work of maintaining aircraft in tropical heat, the terror of kamikaze attacks, the losses of friends in operational accidents that had nothing to do with enemy action. They remember the pride of serving aboard ships that represented America's industrial might, but also the awareness that they were part of something larger than individual heroism. They were the visible edge of an invisible weapon, the factory system that made American victory inevitable. Red Landman, the aviation mechanic who served aboard Bunker Hill and survived her kamikaze attacks, lives to age 100. In his final interviews, he reflects on what the Essex carriers meant. "We knew we were on something special. These ships could take punishment that would sink other vessels and keep fighting. But what really mattered was knowing that even if our ship went down, 10 more would take her place. That gave you confidence. The Japanese never had that. They knew every ship they lost was irreplaceable. That's a psychological burden no amount of courage can overcome." The final accounting is sobering. Japan begins the war with 10 aircraft carriers. At peak strength, it operates 25. By war's end, all are sunk or scrapped. The United States begins with 7 carriers. By 1945, it operates 99. The disparity is not merely quantitative. It represents a fundamental transformation in how wars are fought and won. The Essex-class carriers are the physical manifestation of that transformation, steel monuments to the proposition that in modern warfare, the factory is mightier than the sword. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.